Alright, guys, it is time for story time. And today I'm going to be talking about the sexual experience that completely changed the way I thought about sex forever and really got me onto this path of becoming a sex coach and doing all this stuff that has to do with sex. And yeah, so let's dive into it. So, before we get into the actual story, I want to give you guys some background of who I was at this point in my life. I was a sexually deprived person. I hadn't had sex in a long time. I lost my virginity in my late teens, and then I didn't have sex for a long time because, I don't know, you can call it existential crisis, you can call it depression, all that kind of stuff. But I had a rough patch in my life, and so for 5 years or more, I didn't have any sex at all. So, by no means was I confident going into this sexual experience. I was anxious, I was nervous, and I had this kind of worry that I'd been not having sex for so long that when I actually do have sex, I'm going to be terrible and it's going to be awful and it's going to be embarrassing. And I don't think I'm the only one that thinks that poor performance in sex is extremely embarrassing and they don't want it to happen to them at all. But anyway, so that's who I was at that point in my life. Hadn't had sex in a long time. I wanted to start going out and dating and finding someone to have sex with because I was missing out and I wanted it and I didn't have it for a long time. So I didn't want to go into my first sexual experience after my long drought and be terrible and not know what I was doing and be awful. So I really studied and read all I could about sex and went online and learned about sex tips and all this stuff. I learned a lot of stuff that focused on physical technique and that kind of stuff, but nothing that really focused on the mental part, the psychological part. And to me, I was thinking at that time that the psychological part is probably more important because I was thinking if you masturbate all the time, that's simulating the physical pleasure of sex, especially if you're a girl. And I was trying to have sex with girls, so especially if you're a girl and you have a vibrator or some sex toy, there's no way I could ever compete with that physically. So there had to be some mental component to it. So I decided that instead of focusing on physical techniques, which I knew wasn't going to be my strong suit because I hadn't had any practice in such a long time or any experience really, I decided I would try my hardest to make the experience psychologically stimulating. And so I thought the way that I could do that was to dirty talk. And by dirty talking, I would make sure that they're focused more on being aroused than my poor physical technique. It would give them something to focus on other than my lack of experience and lack of good physical pleasure. So I meet this girl on a dating app and she's into me and I'm into her, and so we decide to meet up and do our thing, and it's gonna be a hookup. It wasn't really a date thing. It was like, yeah, come over and bang. And I was like, okay. Now, I was incredibly nervous going into this because if you haven't had sex in a long time and then you're meeting up with someone that is experienced, and I knew she was experienced by the conversations we had had because we had talked about sex before this happened, just in like messages and texting through the app. I was extremely nervous because I knew that my physical stimulation and probably my mental stimulation wasn't going to be good. I just I had to take one for the team. I was like, I'm just going to practice on her, hope it goes well, and try not to embarrass myself as much as I can, but I figured that I would most likely embarrass myself and it would be horrible and I would probably go another 5 or 6 years without having sex again because I was so ashamed by my performance. So I'm sitting on her bed, like next to her, and it's kind of awkward, and I'm so nervous. my heart is like pounding. I am just unbelievably in my head, and I'm just thinking, don't screw this up, and what do I do? What do I do? So I had this mindset going in that I was going to try to dirty talk and be kind of this like sexual, have all this confidence, and just because I felt like dirty talking and being expressive like that made me look out like I was more experienced than I was. And so we start making out and doing that kind of stuff. Meanwhile, I am a nervous wreck. I am trying to keep it cool and not die at this moment because I was so nervous. And so we're making out. I'm probably terrible at making out at this point because I haven't made out with anyone in a long time either. So I'm just trying to do my best and do other things other than make out, like grab behind her head and touch different places and do all that kind of stuff. So we get to like the actual part where it's gonna get pretty sexual, and so she's like undressing and I'm getting ready to finger her, and I'm like, I have no idea what to do, so I'm like thinking I should say something now. This is the time that I should dirty talk and be this confident guy. But I was so nervous, it was ridiculous. And my brain was like telling me all these things. Don't say this. It's gonna. What if she doesn't like it? What if you make a fool of yourself? What if you say the wrong thing? What if you ruin this sexual experience? What if you get kicked out? My mind was just racing with all these thoughts. I finally mustered the courage to say probably the simplest dirty talk thing you can possibly say, but at that moment it was like the most groundbreaking thing of all time. And I finally got the courage to say it, and I said it, and I delivered it probably, you could probably tell I was nervous by the way I delivered it. And I was like, you like that, don't you? It was just something as simple as that. And to my surprise, she gave me like this moan and said, mm-hmm, and said like, yeah. And I was like, okay. Like, what did I do? And so I was like, I should say another thing, shouldn't I? I should keep it going. And so again, my mind is racing and I'm trying to think of something to say, and my brain is just so cluttered and I'm so nervous. And I muster the courage to say another thing. And that goes over even better. And I'm like, what is happening? Meanwhile, I am currently fingering this girl. And I can tell you, I had no idea what I was doing. I was just touching things and doing what I thought was right. But it seemed to be working, and she seemed to be enjoying it. And so I kept going, and I kept saying these things to her that I considered dirty talk, and I mean, the whole experience was a mess for me mentally. I was so nervous. But after about 30 minutes of constant fingering and actually her reaching multiple orgasms to my surprise, we kind of stopped the fingering thing because I was like, well, my arm's tired and you've had multiple orgasms and I guess it's time to move on. But I was so nervous that I could not get an erection for the life of me. But my brain was totally not in it. I was just, my mind was racing so much. So I knew I wasn't going to get an erection anytime soon. So I was like, yeah, I'm done. That was awesome. That's exactly what I wanted to do. Which obviously I would have liked to have done more, but at that point I knew nothing more was going to happen because I just couldn't get into it. I just wasn't, I was so nervous that I wasn't horny at all or aroused at all. So it was just basically me fingering her and dirty talking. The main point of this story is what she told me after I had finished doing my thing. And what she told me was that that was the best sexual experience she had ever had in her life. That blew my mind. I cannot even explain to you what went through my head at that moment because I was still reeling from the psychological torture that I just went through, all the anxiety. It completely changed my life because I knew I was onto something. I knew my physical technique was not good at all. My fingering was subpar at best. I dirty talked and I kept her aroused and mentally stimulated. And I knew from that point on that the mental component and psychological component to sex was so much more important in determining the quality of the sex. And that just totally blew my mind and it changed my life forever, really. Because from then on, I focused on providing good sexual experiences via mental stimulation as opposed to psychological stimulation. And because of that, I have been able to consistently provide good sexual experiences to every sexual partner I've encountered down the road after that experience. It totally changed my life. It made me go in this direction of sex coaching because I feel like not a lot of people are hearing this message that the psychological component is so much more powerful than the physical component in determining quality of sex. And so I wanted to just tell you that story just so that you guys know that this stuff is true and what I'm saying to you is true, and I've seen it happen multiple times. I've told this to people and they have had the same results that I had. And all I want to do, and the only reason I'm making this YouTube channel, is to help you because I've been there. I was sexually inexperienced and anxious and nervous, and I just wanted to provide a good experience to avoid shame and embarrassment that I knew would come or result from giving a poor sexual experience or performing poorly in bed. And there's so much pressure these days to perform better in bed. And so I want to help you guys cut through the mainstream physical focused sex advice where it's all about physical technique and stimulation and guide you guys into the more important aspect of sex, which is the psychological aspect. It's so much more important in determining the quality of sex. So thank you so much for watching this video, listening to my story. I hope you learned something. I hope it changed your perspective like it did me. And I hope that you go out there and try this for yourself and see how it changes your life. I guarantee you it would change your sex life forever in such a positive way. If you like this video, go ahead and subscribe, like the video, share it to your friends. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you've made it to the end of this video. I hope to see you in the next video. I'm doing daily uploads, so until next time, thank you so much again for watching. Bye, guys.